What's good, yo? We back. RTTV Sports.
Sports.
And if it's your first time in, I promise you definitely won't be your last.
Nah.
So make sure you kill, murder, and smash that subscribe button. And welcome to RTTV Sports, where we cover everything sports. And guys, let's get right into the video.
What's the point? I hate soccer. You do? I can't stand soccer. I think that it's the least talented sport on earth.
Damn, he wilded out.
Football culture shared by so much of the rest of the world. And if you've ever wanted to know why, then this video is the one to watch. Because by the end, you will understand football in America and how it has finally started to change. An important part of that fact, though, is that I'm not English. I'm American, actually. I grew up in American football culture, or soccer as we call it. Through years of traveling around the world to make football videos, I have a unique perspective on how the football culture works inside the United States and how it contrasts to the one outside. You see, the American sporting infrastructure is constructed differently than basically any other country in the world. Those leagues we spend all the time watching are made up of franchises in closed league systems, and they operate as businesses. The vast majority of those franchises did not start as local sporting clubs or small local entities that eventually naturally expanded into large
That's true, yeah.
Arsenal, for example. It was founded by the workers at the Royal Arsenal complex and eventually, through a long winding tale of events, became a massive sports club. And the lack of that structure in the United States means there's a lack of traditional ties to the community that would be familiar to people that grew up in a football culture. Now, that doesn't mean that the franchises don't have deep roots in their community. I grew up in Tampa, and I am a huge Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tampa Bay Lightning, and Tampa Bay Rays fan. What I'm talking about here is something like an academy. There's no academy for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to eventually develop some local
Facts.
one day play for their favorite NFL team. This is a result of the way sports developed in the United States. Now, it did develop at the same time as England or France, for example, but it came up around a different social pillar. While football clubs in those countries were found around different factories or town identities in the United States, sports congregated around something that was already all over the place: the local universities and colleges that blanketed the country. Leagues like the NFL or the NBA were actually formed well after college sports was already a huge attraction in America, so they were built on top of the existing infrastructure.
That's a good point.
Where the draft comes from, this concept of university players that can no longer play at their university being then drafted into professional leagues, and it is completely foreign to people that are used to having academies developing their players instead. But it's because those university teams already existed and were hugely popular before the professional leagues ever did. There was one sport that was so old in the United States that it dodged this. That was baseball, which was founded all the way back in the 1840s and developed a local club system similar to football clubs around the world. And as a result, each professional baseball team has a large minor league system that it uses to develop players, which is more similar to an academy than any other American sport.
Nah, it
By
does.
1870, universities were already competing against each other in what would become American football, and soccer was not adopted by universities as a sport at the top level until 1959 with the modern rules. Dave Litterer, who maintains the USA Soccer History Archive, said that colleges were playing a hybrid, neither fully soccer nor rugby, but it's only a guess. I don't know, and neither I think does anybody else. That's rather a satisfying answer in this day and age, but history is not an exact science. Now, he's talking about way back in 1870 when American football and soccer looked a lot more similar than they do now. The truth is, none of those early games played by American universities look like American football, rugby, or soccer the way that those
Holland.
sports look today. But eventually, the rules of the sport that was played by these university and colleges all over the place were codified and progressed in the direction that would become American football. But what did give the United States continued exposure to developing rules of soccer was immigration. 25 million Europeans.
That makes sense. So all them came over here and put Americans on the football.
8 million people from the British Isles. As a result, particularly in immigrant communities, the modern rules of soccer were played in a lot of local leagues and clubs. And it was actually out of this crop of players that the United States selected its first World Cup roster for the 1930 World Cup, the first one ever. This team, quite amazingly, managed to reach the World Cup semifinal by beating Belgium and Paraguay. Smacked by Argentina 6-1. Who would go on to lose to eventual champions Uruguay. The tiebreaker from the group stage actually gave the United States a third-place finish, which is still the best finish by any team ever from outside of Europe or South America. And the striker on that team, Bert Patnaud from Fall River, Massachusetts, actually made
Forever.
first ever World Cup hat trick against Paraguay.
That's hard.
In the United States, there was no cohesive place for them to play. Besides, the United States prevented a national league from developing, and the university preference for American football meant that these players could only practice at local clubs and various leagues that would would only play in 4 more World Cup matches until 1990. As other footballing
That's
countries
crazy.
developing league systems and professionalizing their players to train at a higher level, the United States strategy of just slapping together a team of immigrant or second-generation players from local leagues to go play the World Cup just wasn't working nearly as well. There was also this underlying factor, this driving motivation to assimilate into U.S. culture. The rules for association football were viewed as foreign. After all, the United States had its own rules, and it had its own sports. The United States is almost entirely an immigrant nation. Even in the annals of my own personal family history, there are stories of great-grandparents that didn't teach their kids their native language from where they came from because of fear of those kids being ostracized. They wanted them to be able to completely assimilate into society, and speaking another language wouldn't help them do that. Which is ironic, because now it would be really helpful. But here I am trying to use Rosetta Stone.
Said, damn, I wish I learned the language before.
Factors working against it and no cohesive plan to try and save association football, it just became something that nobody cared about. It is worth mentioning, though, that the United States did beat England at the 1950 World Cup in England's first ever World Cup appearance in Brazil. It's considered one of the greatest upsets in World Cup history, with the U.S. coach saying before the game that his team were sheep ready to be slaughtered.
Damn.
A motivation tactic.
Yeah.
He was obviously full of professional players. Everybody on the U.S. team had jobs on the side and was still playing with those small clubs and local leagues. It is absolutely hilarious how unorganized it was compared to today. I mean, the U.S. captain was picked specifically for that game. It was some dude
That's
named
wild.
McIlvaine, who had been born in Scotland, and the reason they gave for picking him as the captain in that match was, well, he was British. The guy actually went on to play for Manchester United, by the way.
Oh, that's hard.
Tail of the bank. And maybe, just maybe, with the idea of the internet and instant communication, this sort of miracle story would have spurned an interest in association football in the United States, the plucky underdogs upsetting favorites England. But none of that existed. In fact, only one American reporter was in Brazil at all. It's because he decided that he should cover it on his own. He paid for his own trip to Brazil to cover the tournament. It was clear that the United States had settled into association football as a second-tier sport. And for 40 years, it stayed that way. The U.S. existed entirely outside of the footballing world.
That's crazy. 40 years and he wasn't participating in the World Cup.
There was actually one very surprising silver lining that saved football in the United States, and that was university sports, actually. And first, this was actually on the women's side of the game, thanks to a law colloquially called Title IX. This was a law regarding scholarships for American university and college sports teams. Scholarships being a free ticket to go to school, which can be quite expensive in the United States, in exchange for being a very good athlete playing on one of the sports teams. Well, Title IX said that each college and university had to give out the same number of men's and women's scholarships for sports every year, and it was enacted all the way back in 1972. The problem for schools immediately was all the scholarships given out on the American football teams, because that's a sport that's only been played by men at the university level. So there was no women's team full of scholarship American football players to balance it out. This led a ton of universities and colleges to jump into creating women's soccer teams, because
And that's why they end up winning the World Cup, bro.
relatively cheap, so you could get a lot of scholarships to help balance out your scholarship inequity. The result was a very large apparatus of identifying and developing talented women's soccer players before really any other country in the world. And by the time the first Women's World Cup was created in 1991, the United States had created a machine. Despite being a non-factor on the men's side that had just qualified for its first World Cup in 50 years, the United States women won the entire tournament. By 1999, the women's national team had become superstars because the United States was good at it. They won the World Cup in a sold-out Rose Bowl in California. Over 1.1 million people attended that 1999 Women's World Cup.
It was holding it down.
Ready to embrace soccer for the first time as long as the team was winning. After all, the United States is a sucker for a spectacle. And it was through star power that the men's side of things got its first jolt, its first false start. When Pele signed for the New York Cosmos in 1975, and him and a couple of other famous
Oh, wow.
days gone by were selling out American football
He started.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
The NASL was the United States' first serious attempt at a top-level outdoor professional league. But once the star power departed, the NASL quickly folded back into nothingness. All the while, the grassroots development of American men's players was not kicking on at all. In fact, because of the American football scholarship disparity in Title IX, there are a lot less men's university teams than there are women's university teams. By the time the NASL failed, the American FA knew that it had to do something won the bid for the 1994 Men's World Cup, despite having never qualified for a World Cup past 1950. And it was at that moment, once again, surprisingly, that university sports came to the aid of American football. Well, not American football, but like American Association football. I was bound to mess that up eventually. After all, after the NASL disappeared, there was no professional outdoor league. The high amateur level of university soccer on the men's side, as limited as it might be, was the highest level you could play outdoors in the country. The U.S. coach
That's interesting.
picked a team of players fresh out of college to try and make it to the 1990 World Cup in preparation for 94. And those players were given small contracts by the American FA so they could train professionally in preparation. Dantzler said of his team, many of them were second-generation immigrants. Their parents and family lives different from an apple pie American ideal. They loved a sport that many around them reviled. That last bit we will come back to later, don't worry. The qualification for 1990 was huge because there were rumors that if the United States couldn't make a decent showing at the 1990 World Cup, the 94 World Cup might actually be pulled. And it all came down to the final qualifying match that, get this, Trinidad and Tobago, which hadn't lost at home in 2 years at that point. The national stadium in Port of Spain was packed. The United States managed to deliver what was perhaps its most important win ever on the men's side. A stunning strike from Paul Caligiuri gave the Americans a 1-0 win.
Putting it in to Caligiuri. Beats the first man. A left-footed shot.
Bro, he clutched up right there. My boy saved U.S. soccer.
Survived the 1990 World Cup, its first in 50 years, with a thud of 5-1 loss against Czechoslovakia.
Damn.
The next match was against the hosts, Italy, and that match was projected to get wildly out of hand. I mean, why wouldn't it? The United States was essentially a college all-star team with 1 or 2 professionals thrown in for spice and flair against a team that had Baresi, Baldini, Baggio. But in the
Baldini.
performance, the United States only lost 1-0.
Oh, they held it down.
And for full and early access to our Patreon, make sure you click the link in the description below. We have the TV shows Slam Dunk and Baki. We have sports movies and sports TV shows and much, much more. And guys, make sure you check out our members only, where we have exclusive videos like World Cups, 1994, 1998, and much more.
Facts.
And today's video is titled "Why the U.S. Sucks at Football." Let's get right into it. We're from the U.S., so let's figure it out.
Host nation fans actually booed their star-studded team off the field.
Damn.
Performance that opened doors for Americans in European leagues in a serious way for the first time, with 10 players from that team in 1990 going on to sign contracts to play professionally in Europe.
Oh, they came up.
The first ever American to play in the Premier League, and recognizable names like Casey Keller. This produced a much more competitive team at the 1994 World Cup for the United States, where it pulled off a shocking upset of Colombia to actually make it to the knockout stages in its home World Cup. And that home World Cup coincided with the founding of MLS, which was the first sustainable professional outdoor league in the United States in 1994. Although that wasn't clear immediately because MLS was a bit fledgling in its early years, but was able to build itself up by convincing owners to buy into the league instead of individual teams. But it also was designed to appeal to an American public that was used to franchises in closed leagues. I made an entire video about MLS. I'll link you to it at the end of this video, but the point is eventually it developed into a very profitable league structure that could also produce and develop professional players in a way the United States has never been able to do before. But it's still not developing players the same way a club in a normal football league.
It's alright, we'll get there.
Because of university sports. University men's soccer went from a help to get the national team off the ground to a hindrance, often forcing young players to choose between multi-year commitments to play at a university or just going pro out of high school at 17 or 18 years of age. Not to mention the serious issues caused by a lack of football academies in the United States, because MLS, which is a closed system, is only going to have 30 teams in it, which means everybody else has to pay for play in the youth system.
Oh, damn.
For example, the travel team I grew up playing in ended at U18 because after that everybody just got a job or went to college. There was no senior club attached to it that was playing in like the 4th tier of anything. That doesn't exist. But there was and still is a more significant cultural inertia for football to overcome in America. And this brings me back to that comment that the U.S. coach made when he was building his 1990 squad, talking about how the sport was reviled. Now, there are no facts here, no quantifiable way to discuss this, but the coach captured a long-held distaste that many Americans felt for soccer when he used the word revile. Because of how sports and society developed in the United States, as we just talked about, soccer was a foreign sport. It was played by the other. It was un-American. And so the more American you became as an immigrant, the less you played it. And as a result, it was excluded from the American national This isn't soccer. Stop flopping around. In the United States, we like to think of ourselves as very tough. And American football in particular embodies this. It's a brutally tough sport, and soccer was soft by comparison. This is hard to explain as an American, but we essentially have an inferiority and superiority complex at the same time. We lack the historical precedent and cultural development of many other countries around the world. We know we are rougher around the edges, and as a result, we treat the perceived refinement of these other cultures as a weakness.
Ooh, this dude's over here spitting right now.
That they all played soccer, and soccer is still now reviled by a portion of the American population for lack of a better word, not being a manly enough sport. But that perception is changing through my generation and the generation before me. First, it was Dempsey and Donovan, then the generation of Pulisic, Adams, and McKinney. We grew up watching the Premier League on TV on Saturday mornings, playing FIFA online with our friends, learning about the world of football.
Nah, I feel like more people got it because of FIFA.
Yeah, man, yo, there's a lot of people that play FIFA, yo.
Part of it. A deep cultural understanding of the rules doesn't exist yet, but recognition of the sport has increased infinitely from that hard-scrabble group of trailblazers back in 1990. To watch the World Cup knockout match against the Netherlands in 2022, I had to wait outside a bar for 2 hours at 6 a.m. just to get inside and watch the game. The 2015 Women's World Cup final was watched by 27 million Americans. That's 10 million more Americans than English people that watched the English women's team win the European Championship in 2022. In a Washington Post poll after the 2022 World Cup, 8% of Americans said that soccer was their favorite sport, just a few percentage points behind baseball and basketball. And among Americans under 30, soccer had passed baseball in that same poll.
Oh yeah, soccer is way better than
Yeah,
baseball.
facts.
Even though football in the United States will always look and feel different because of the way it was formed, American football, American Association football, will never be lost in the darkness again. Thank you to Isaiah, our research partner in this piece. If you want to read or watch any of the sources we used for this entire video, they're all down in the description. If you want to watch that MLS video I was talking about, it's a beginner's guide to MLS. It's right there. And if you enjoyed this video, then please do subscribe. Then you can head over there, keep binge watching, blow off the rest of your day. Who needs a to-do list? There's videos to watch.
That was a smooth video right there, yo. Very insightful.
Clear, it helped us understand very well because yeah, American sports we don't have academies and stuff. That's our sports is more business, and university was the first big like college football, college basketball was in the first popular sports.
Yeah.
So that does mess it up, and it makes sense to why there's more women's soccer teams, and it makes sense why the U.S. women's soccer team is so good because a lot of countries are kind of sexist. So
They're not putting as much emphasis on that. Yeah, exactly.
Where America is like they had no choice. Like, oh wait, football America? Because I never thought of it. It's true. Football's only played by guys. There's no women's football. So that does throw a balance. Like, wait, we have to have another sport that's just more girls than we have for guys. And I didn't know soccer was that.
Bro, I didn't even know that they had to equally dish out like scholarships for men and women and stuff. So like
That makes sense.
That's cool. Yeah, it does make sense, and it's cool that I was like, all right, now we have that knowledge of that, and the fact that women's soccer had to equalize it because of that. But this is dope right here, and it's cool that we're witnessing the resurgence of soccer in America right now, bro. Like you got the jersey on and everything. It's like it's blowing up here, and I can't imagine how it's gonna be within the next 10 years.
Yeah, man. So make sure y'all keep it locked on our journey to the World Cup 2026.
Yep.
And guys, man, soccer, football, it's becoming life.
Facts.
We're up to the RT.
Patrick RT.
And that settles it at
The round table.